I'll admit, I've not actually looked at what you sent me the message about, but I just assumed you'd take care of it here. Okay, with Carla here, I'm going to call this meeting to order. And we will, the first thing on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And this is where you said you were going to make a motion, yes?
Hello? Oh, the light's broken. I move that we move section 7 above section 5
Okay, is there?
for discussion, and should I make it combined or a separate motion?
No, you can go ahead.
And to remove DLB for consideration at next meeting.
All right. Second, is there any discussion on that point?
DLB is just, we had some recommended changes as far as timeline, and they didn't make it onto this. So I think we'll just move it to next month because we have a lot of other things to discuss.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? All right. All in favor of the change in agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. And the other thing that I'd like to do for the agenda is we've got somebody who has to leave very soon after that. So I would like to move unfinished business D right under the policies without change, if that's okay. Can I just get a consensus? Does everyone agree with that? Yes. Okay. All right. So do I have a motion about the agenda as amended?
I motion that we accept the agenda as amended.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. So the next thing is the reading of the equity statement. Ms. London?
Columbia Public Schools, through action and in partnership with families and community, will uphold the values, policies, and practices that promote cultural competence. We will accept, embrace, and empower students and staff in their individual identities to establish and sustain human dignity, justice, and equitable treatment and inclusiveness in the classroom and workplace.
All right. Thank you. So the next thing on the agenda is the policies for review without changes, except for item C. Is there any motion or discussion?
I will just assume everyone has read these, and I move that we accept them without changes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Does anyone feel they need to take one off for discussion today? Okay. All right, then all in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I also stated aye, by the way. I forgot to say something. Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to JGE. The last time around, if you recall, there was some discussion about adding some additional language in the discipline of students with disabilities. And we sent around the AP model policies, but I know that the committee wanted some discussion on this, so I'm just going to throw it open to what the committee would like to discuss after I get to this policy.
I think last month Anne moved that JGE be brought back with more parent-friendly language or a consideration of adoption of JGE AP1 and AP2 that we currently do not have. But I don't see any, I have 2 copies for some reason of it. Oh, the core one.
Yeah,
Okay.
the AP1 and AP2 are in the booklet.
Yeah, AP1 and AP2 are in the packet. They are not
Right.
they are not procedures that CPS currently has.
Correct. Yes.
And the core policy from MSBA is currently identical to the CPS policy that we have. I was just stating that I think Ann requested some either more parent-friendly language or adoption of these other two, and we haven't changed anything here,
Don't
so.
think it was me, I think it was Marjorie, but I'm happy to, or maybe I moved it, but I. it
You,
was because
you
of
did,
Okay.
yeah.
Great, so what, we had not seen that the, procedures.
Right.
That was the reasoning then. was
Right.
That we had not seen this, so has administration given any thought to the procedures or to the thoughts about the procedures?
So that may be where we,
Because that's what we had moved it forward so that we could think about the procedures, I think.
right, so okay. I believe some of those questions are addressed, or most of those, we said were addressed in the procedural safeguards that go home to parents. And so adding those into policy, I think was a discussion on whether or not that was something that was necessary. We have our Director of Special Education too, if you.
Well, I remember looking it up in the, after the meeting, I looked it up in the, parent handbook, which I think you referred us to, but that parent handbook just referred back to JGE when it dealt with students with disabilities, I believe. And so that's where I
It
was.
should be pretty intense with the, Elise, do you want to join us at the?
You can sit anywhere you want. You can sit next to me, or you can sit down by April, whichever you prefer. All right. Welcome. Here. Yep. And make sure the light is off when you speak.
Ann, are you still looking?
I'm
you take a second?
looking for the parent handbook, so I pulled it up after our last.
Yeah, I looked for it the other day, just the handbook, and I had trouble finding it.
Is the question that we want to add that into policy?
I'm articulating something that somebody else said, but it was that they would like a little bit of consideration because they didn't feel that this was quite enough to inform parents. And so I'm throwing it out to, and we're having a general discussion instead of a motion at this point, because I don't know exactly what specifically we need to put into this policy.
I'm weary of doing that based on the laws and how they change, and then it can confuse other parents who may not have a need for that information. It is given to parents, they sign off on it, they can request an additional one. Many times it's sent home like 4 or 5 different times for that parent who is involved with the student with disabilities. I understand wanting it out there, but I am concerned that it could be misunderstood by a parent who does not need that information.
And I think the only point of clarification here is that we're not
Pull yours
talking
down
about,
just a little bit so you.
we're not talking about adopting it into policy, we're talking about adopting a procedure, right? So that wouldn't make that procedure policy, is that?
Well, if we put it into the policies, yes, it would, but I think the concern is to ensure that, I think the question was, is there something that is digestible that parents can view? And I think the thinking was either it needs to be in policy or somebody needs to point out where it is that the parents
Yes.
can view.
Yeah, because I could not find it after the meeting. When I looked, and I've now pulled the student handbook up in front of me, and when I looked in the student handbook, and I'm looking again now, it's not a searchable document the way it pulls up for me. I found just a reference back to JGE, which did not get to the things which we had an email from somebody asking questions about. And so I think,
So you,
can someone point out where that is?
yeah, so I think you are referencing the student handbook versus if you go under the Special Services Department, procedural safeguards,
Everything's
which
out
is going to
there.
be and that will be the area that addresses the same policy here, students with disabilities.
Is that, I'm sorry, was that student services? Or
Special Services, I'm sorry. I just left Student Services Department, so.
Well,
in my
I
brain.
always
we
get
had-
them, I always get them confused.
So the procedural safeguards, that's just Part B of IDEA.
Correct.
Right. And so what, and I am having a little difficulty because Marjorie had been very interested in this topic, so I'm trying to represent what she and I had talked about, because she's not here tonight. Is she was going to Zoom. Is she unavailable to?
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Okay.
She
Okay.
didn't contact me specifically about that.
Okay, so I believe that the concern is, as someone who has read all of Part B, it is not a short or digestible by parents document. And so what we were looking for is there a document that lays those safeguards out in a digestible way such that the procedures, that the administrative procedures do, you know, making clear like, oh, well, if you're being disciplined for a behavior that is related to your disability, you're still going to get, after a certain number of days, you're still going to get education at home, which may be different than somebody who doesn't have a disability, like those sorts of things in a digestible format, other than just
Related specifically to discipline.
correct.
Yeah.
Have to consistently keep in mind when we're talking about the IEP is that the I stands for individualized. And so the ability to walk through that document with parents during an IEP meeting and what is specifically relatable to them seems to be most helpful rather than putting out just a general, because if you go back then and say, well, how come my kiddo didn't get this? Well, remember in procedural safeguards when we went over this and what discipline might look like for your specific student, seems to be more applicable to the individualized part of an IEP. Does that?
Well, except IDEA does provide some baseline requirements for all children with disabilities, and I think those were the ones that we were referencing. So there are some things in Part B of IDEA that no matter what their IEP says, all students are guaranteed certain safeguards, and there's, you know, a gazillion pages of them. But I think it's those that are in the administrative policy. So, for example, you know, breaking out what happens if you're, I mean, it's kind of like what these procedures that we have in the packet now say. Those things apply regardless of your IEP, I believe.
What section are you, because I mean, have it pulled up. Are you in the
So
administrative
I'm looking at the
procedures?
procedure.
Okay, and what section, sorry, thank you. What section specifically?
Okay, so there's a discipline option, suspension for 10 school days or fewer. And it very clearly lays out 3 things that will happen. And then short-term suspensions when services may need to be provided. And there's 4 things that are listed there. And I don't find that readability in the IDEA.
Within the procedural safeguards?
Right. I mean, if
Okay.
you could show me where it is, I'm happy to look at it.
I think part of the discussion that we were having back in October was that I had had a parent contact me just asking for more clarity in the policy. And I had said alternately, if we're already doing these things,
Which are required.
which I don't know if we are, but if we're already doing these things, could we just not adopt these things? Easy peasy. I don't know. That's why I asked the question. So that was what I wanted consideration
And
for.
these are the things that are required by law, right? There's nothing in the MSBA procedural guideline that is not required under IDEA, but IDEA, the procedural safeguards are 35 pages, and this is like 4. So it helps parents to navigate that information like, oh, my son just got suspended for 10 days. He is a student, a scholar with a disability. What happens? And I can just look at this and say, oh, 10-day suspension for a student for a scholar with a disability. Here's what happens, instead of trying to go to this 35-page document that doesn't break it out by, the disciplinary procedure. It just makes it easier for parents to access.
And you likely need a advanced degree to understand the 35-page
I mean,
document.
I have a law degree, and sometimes I question whether I understand.
Right.
I understand making this readable for parents and that they can understand it, but at the same time, the policy is asking us to adopt information. It is not asking us to provide that. That might be something at a later date. I just don't see how they come together.
So just first for clarification, so we have the administrative procedures that are interpreted for the policy. And what I'm seeing here are sort of the common things that we would be dealing with: short-term suspensions, long-term suspensions, automatic referrals after 45 days. However, the safeguards are broader. They get into more intricacies because there are conditions that will come up that we can't address. It's too many, right? Especially when you're dealing with an IEP and, certain behavioral modifications. So the only, to me, is to be able to refer to the safeguards as the go-to document, because that's legal. We know that is basically, the law. And in short of printing that whole thing out and saying, okay, we'll follow the whole thing, which we are doing anyway, this basically gives us a brief synopsis of these are the things that are the go-to here. Anything outside of this, then we really need to be looking at the, even more closely, with why it's happening and so on. We shouldn't just go to the safeguards and go, okay, we're doing this because it's in the safeguards. It provides sort of a safety net to ensure that we don't go too far down the road without us within our school or within our department addressing that issue. That's what I see happening here.
Right, so I agree, and so to April's point as well, I think that we're already doing these things, because I do think that these things are required by law.
Yes.
Right? So both the things in the procedural safeguards and in the procedures that MSBA has written MSBA hasn't added anything extra. In theory, these are the things that we're already doing, so this would just be a way of communicating those things to parents. It would not be that we're saying like, oh, CPS administration, you have to now do it this way. It's, you're already doing this, but here's a way that parents can read it. And if this has happened to their scholar, they can look and think this. And then you're right. If they're like, but it's a little more nuanced, then you send them to the 35-page document. Hopefully they go, and if they need it, get some sort of representation. Right. But this is a way that parents can feel confident that they can read something that's digestible and know whether they should be asking for services. I actually think it would benefit administration to be able to say, no, look, you don't get any services for this 10-day thing, or you do, you're right, your child's out for 6 months. There are some minimal services. In that way, I would think that it would make it easier than having students show up at administration or show up at student services and say, like, I want services. My kid's been suspended for this amount of time. This is like a much easier document to give them. If it's not something you're already doing, I am not in any way, as Karen suggested, saying that we should adopt something new at this table that you're not already doing. That's not, I would never suggest that. But if you're doing it, maybe this is an easier way for parents to access it.
So a couple of things happen with a suspension. If you're talking about a long-term suspension, the parent's going to be notified anyway by either school leadership, or it's going to be an administrator that makes that decision, right? I think to Karen's point and to what Paul said earlier, once you adopt these as part of policy, so we have a lot of procedures that we have in the district. Once you adopt them and they become policy, then you are held to following them. And Grant can correct me if I'm wrong, but you are correct. I mean, you are expected then to follow them as outlined directly in the policy. So I'm looking at For instance, under long-term suspension. Number 2, if the superintendent concludes that the misconduct warrants a long-term suspension, he or she will notify the director of special education or designee. In some districts, it may be the superintendent that makes that determination. In our district, it would probably be a chief of schools or somebody else that's an interim. So MSBA will lay out the broader procedure. So these are some things that you do and put some titles with them that wouldn't necessarily fit procedurally the way that we would do it. Overall, overarchingly, yes, but as far as titles and adopting these exact procedures. So I think that's why ours has been intentional. We have historically not adopted APs from MSBA because it does allow us then the flexibility as a locally run school district to, if our procedure looks different than something that they have suggested in here, then we're still able to do that. Am I missing anything, Elise, as far as what would happen if a student is assigned a long-term suspension? The parent would be notified. In other words, they wouldn't have to go digging through, like, what happens now? Or show up at the board office and say, my kid's been suspended, I don't know what to do. That is something that would be talked through with them.
So they would be contacted and they would be given the procedural safeguards, which is a 35-page document.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we can.
Okay.
Now you're on.
Yes, a part of whenever a student receives a suspension, then a part of that process is providing the procedural safeguards. And I understand that the procedural safeguards are not, they're not an easy read. However, it is our responsibility as a district to make sure that if a parent doesn't understand, then it's our job to explain it. But the other thing that we do is that if a student gets a long-term suspension, then we immediately have to start providing services. Now, I'm not going to say that it's decided in the very next day, but if we miss a day, then we know we have to make that up because we need to start providing services to that student. There's a part of me that feels like the human factor to this, that the team member, the case manager, the building who has that relationship, for me, that's where it should come from. That's the people that have the connection. That's who can help a family understand. Your student has now been recommended for a long-term suspension. What does that mean? And so does it mean, was it a manifestation of their disability? So then does that mean that they come back the next day? So in that situation, they come back. There's just so many layers to it, and I don't want to lose the human factor to that.
And I'm not suggesting in any way that you should lose the human factor. And I think this will be, it sounds like I'm the only one on this side of this fence. So I think I'll stop after this last statement because, you can see when the river's going one way to not walk upriver the other way. But I do have just a couple of closing comments on it. And number one is that both special education and discipline can and usually are adversarial processes. And so it's really important that parents are aware of their rights and that their only source of information isn't from the verbal relationships with the people who are in charge. So I think having something in writing is important, but shouldn't supplant that what you're getting from special education services. And I don't think that adopting something supplants it in any way. I think that it gives the opportunity for parents, and when they're not hot under the collar and hearing everything that's happening with their scholar, to have something to look back at and to think about. And I think if we're already, in my opinion, if we're already doing these things, and even to the point of, it's a designee, well, that's in the language here. Either we should adopt these, or I think administration, this is just my opinion, should create a 4-page procedure document so that we know that we're not just sending people to a 35-page legal document to look at. That's my opinion, whether it's through these or whether it's something that you guys create. I think that it would take a little bit of the adversarialness out of the interaction, but I would never supplant the person-to-person contact in any way. That's vital to the success of folks' relationships and success of scholars. So I was never suggesting that. I just think it would be helpful to have procedures.
And I think that is the reason why we initially brought it up. You know, I had hoped that we would review AP 1 and 2 to one, see, is that what we're currently doing? If there's things in there that we're not currently doing, do we revise them in any way to, you know, reword something that makes it in alignment with what we're doing? And having been a parent who had to look through policy to find out steps for discipline, it can be confusing. So I don't even want to have to go to the 35-page document. So I understand your point. It is helpful, and it can reduce administration if they have something that they can reference and easily understand. And the only reason why I brought these forward in October was because I knew that we had adopted other AP procedures in policy surrounding technology and stuff like that. So I saw these and I was like, oh, well, these are kind of nice. If that's what we're doing, this would be really straightforward language, not for you guys to do something new or add something to your plate at all.
All right, so does anyone have a motion as to what to do with policy JGE?
Well, I'm wondering if there is, and maybe it's in the original policy and I'm just not reading it right. Is there something we should put in here to reference those safeguards? I mean, we reference a bunch of statutes. We reference that we're gonna follow laws. What's it called? Maybe I'm just not, maybe I'm. This is called Procedure Safeguard Notice. Well, so I guess that this is coming from someone who would be like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. But you're saying that, you know, if this were to happen to my child, you would refer me to the procedural safeguard notices that's under special services. But when I'm looking at this, I'm not seeing something that says procedural safeguard notices, so I'm gonna be like, oh, what do I do now? I don't know. That's just me. I'm just wondering.
So do we need to add procedural safeguards?
I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
I can only swim upstream so far.
I mean, my thoughts are personally, if we're following AP 1 and 2, we should adopt those, but I could make that motion, but I don't think it'll pass.
Your question is, should there be something referencing the
Yeah.
procedural safeguards will be?
Because this email that I had was just saying, could the policy be updated to explain what federal law permits related to disciplining students with disabilities?
So could we change that?
Yeah,
first,
that's true.
Could we change that first sentence to the district will comply with all state and federal laws, including procedural safeguards that govern the discipline of students with disabilities? So that way we have it in there?
I mean, it is covered under IDEA, right? So I grant you can,
So it's already covered in there?
You think it's covered? Okay.
IDEA includes the procedural safeguards. That's part B of IDEA. So
Okay,
it's
so-
already in here, but again, a parent would not know that. I know that because I've read IDEA. I mean, I don't know what, I guess, a parent without a law degree would or wouldn't know, but I think that, like, it's covered, it is definitely covered in here. It is, it says IDEA, it says,
Right.
students with disabilities, including the Individuals with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and applicable regulations and state laws.
And if you are talking about the cross-references, I would just point out that that 34 CFR, Part 104, which is the IDEA implementing regulations, are in there also as a cross-reference. So somebody with a law degree certainly could find everything. But I concur that for many parents, this policy is probably not enough information, and they do have to rely on other information.
And remember, as part of our procedures, as part of our protocols, is that we must inform them of the part or the parts of, because as part of the due process, we have to let them know what we're doing, why we're doing, and what laws or what procedures we are following. We can't just arbitrarily just, do whatever discipline there is and not give that due process.
So do we have a motion that anybody wants to make?
I move to accept JGE as written.
So I believe that would be a motion to, that we do not need to make any changes to JGE, because I believe that's how it originally was presented on the agenda 2 months ago.
I move that we accept JGE as written because there haven't been any changes.
Second.
So basically, this is just a review with no changes.
This
like
this
we
is a
would-
review of no change, just like the
Other
list that
list.
we just did. So the last review date would move up to today, which is, I believe, how it actually first appeared on our radar.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. 3 noes and 3 yeses, so it does not pass. Wait,
No changes.
so no changes, and it just no change of the review date. So, yep. It will remain as it is, without change. All right, thank you so much for coming, and I'm assuming that's why Devin was here too, was to listen to this also, so thank you for showing up. All right. So now we can move on to consideration of approval of minutes from previous meetings. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt the minutes from the October and November meetings.
Second?
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, so policies in Tier 1, we will start with annual budget.
I have a motion.
Oh, perfect, go.
I am wanting to once again remove DB and DJF for next meeting. DJFA, I'm sorry. The reason being, last month we had DB on, but we moved it to add DJFA because DB referenced DJFA.
Okay,
However, DJFA references DJFAP1, which the district does not currently have adopted. So maybe we should, since we have so much on the agenda, maybe we should move these to next month to give administration the opportunity to decide whether or not they would like to adopt AP1, DJFAP1,
or to change that cross.
or to change that cross-reference.
I'm gonna second that motion to move it to next meeting. Is there any further discussion?
Which is the policy you're saying we have not adopted?
DJF AP1.
DJF, Administrative Procedure 1.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So that's what we need to look at. All right,
Yep.
no problem. Okay, thank you.
The one that she's talking about is it's in that paragraph I circled. All right, so all in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then those will be moved to the next meeting for further consideration. All right, so the next thing is GCBA. Oh, you can keep that. I'm good. And I think I had something. GCBA. Okay, it has been.
It wasn't, this is not the version that was on the
Oh, okay, good.
agenda.
Okay, so it did get updated then.
Yeah.
In our books. Okay, so the recommendation is to change 30 days to 90 days and prior to the end of the current fiscal year, which matches the collective bargaining agreement so that the policy matches the CBA. Is there any motion?
I motion that we accept GCBA with the changes of moving from 30 days to 90 days and to end at the current fiscal year.
I
Second.
had a question.
Do I have a second first?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, go ahead, April.
So my question is, because I know I pointed this out, but my only question, and I know that it aligns with the current CBA, the part of end at the current fiscal year, but I know that there could be an issue where someone realizes on June 28th, their paycheck is wrong, or June 30th, and then it became July 1st. I'm wondering about the restriction on the time frame. I mean, if I'm an employee and I notice that my paycheck is wrong on June 30th, and I send an email, and somebody gets the email on July 2nd, is my paycheck gonna get corrected?
I believe, Michelle, remind me, but I believe that it says notify within, so if you've notified on the 30th, you should still be within that
That
time
should
frame.
not be an issue, okay. Because I think we ran into something similar to that earlier this year. Okay, I just wanted to make,
This was originally, I think, more like 4 months later, I realized that something was amiss on my check. For last year, whatever, so just to sort of say there's a time period that the business office.
There has to be, yeah, of course.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, if not, the motion on the floor is to accept the changes as recommended. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that passes. And we'll go to the board. All right, the next one is HA, notification, or negotiations with employee representatives. And the change that is recommended is to change a may to a shall and to add within 30 days of approval. Are there any motions? Well, I'll move that we adopt as recommend. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so April, go ahead.
And I know that it probably it might change every year, but doesn't the current CBA say 15 days? I think. That's the only, and I don't know if there's a better way to word it. Because, this time you guys might agree on 30 days.
Could maybe refer to the,
It says,
it is 15, okay.
I think Michelle has it pulled up. Light needs to be off. Don't put it that close because it's.
Yeah, it does say within 15 days of final approval of this agreement by both parties, this agreement will be placed on the district's website and will be made available in print following appropriate request. So it does say 15 days.
Yeah.
I will say that 15 days when you're actually in it and doing it, goes by very quickly. And then I would also ask if 15 days, is that business days? Is that just
I agree with
15
you.
total days?
I agree
That
with
would-
you.
All right, can I suggest language here?
Yes.
Can I suggest to remove within 30 days and state as provided by the collective bargaining agreement? Yes, let me write this down first so that I know that I'm saying the right thing. Okay, so I'm going to move that we amend the motion on the floor. Well, actually, it's my own motion, so I'm going to change my motion to still say shall, but instead of saying within 30 days of approval, remove that and say as provided by the collective bargaining agreement. I would just say as provided by the collective bargaining agreement and just leave it at that. All right, is there any discussion? Does anyone disagree with that? I think it's wonderful if the CBA changes. Yes. Okay. All right, so all in favor of policy HA as amended, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then that one goes to the board. All right, moving right along, we have KL. And I'll be honest with you, my memory just
I
slipped.
can tell you.
Okay, I'll let April explain this one. I
KL is
forgot what this one
simply
was.
because of our reorganization structure, and so it's just taking the words assistant superintendent and deputy superintendent and changing them to executive officer and chief schools officer, so they align with our current organizational structure.
Okay, is there a motion? Do you have a motion?
I move that we adopt KL as presented.
Second?
Okay, is there any discussion on this one? All right, all in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that one goes to the board. All right. So KM, and this one I actually sat down with Dr. Yearwood because both we have an organization that no longer is active, and we also now have parents groups that go beyond PTAs. So we sat down and tried to come up with language that we thought encompassed what we should say in our under our current structures. And this is the language we came to. So I'm going to move that we adopt KM as recommended.
Second.
Is there any discussion here?
I like the changes that administration and Paul came up with, because I was narrowly focused on the fact that CCPTA didn't exist anymore.
Right. But yeah, but we also wanted to make sure we
I
included
think that's
the boosters
wonderful.
too.
I'm glad you guys did that.
All right, so all in favor of sending that to the board, please state aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and that one goes to the board. All right, now for the unfinished business. BCE. And let me check my notes. Do I have notes on BCE?
I have a motion.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I move that we adopt MSBA's recommended core policy, BCE, to replace current board policy, BCE.
Okay.
Second.
All right, and I just remembered why I didn't have notes, because I should have remembered this one. This is the one that that in the past we set up the specific committees within the policies. We suspended those at the beginning of this term of the board, and we've been having discussions just not as a group, but I've been having discussions with Suzette about let's give us more flexibility to set our committees at the organization meeting that is required by policy that we have every time a new board is elected. So rolling it back to BCE allows for that flexibility. It doesn't mean that we will not still have a policy committee. In fact, as long as I'm on the board, I will be advocating for a policy committee because I think it's absolutely necessary. We'll probably always have a finance committee or a combined finance committee and facilities committee like we do now, but this gives the board flexibility to say how many people are on it and that. So I'll put it out for discussion. And Dr. Yearwood, I know you and I had a conversation about it. Do you have something you want to say about rolling it back, or have you thought about it more?
No. That's fine. I think the 3 committees are critical because it adds transparency with finances. It also allows for interaction with our community and our board as far as long-term planning for facilities and bonds and things like that. So, as long as there's some level of fidelity for maintaining, and like you say, you see the importance of it, I think that's where it needs to go.
No, and I absolutely do see the need for those committees. What the makeup of those committees, I do think that it would be good to have each board explicitly vote on it each time. And as we had problems at the beginning of this term with who should make up those committees, I think it does give greater flexibility to future boards. Is my opinion.
And does MSBA say who is responsible for selection? It does say that does mean the board president may appoint temporary ad hoc. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, as long as there's a line in there that shows that the president can, then it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Do we have any further discussion? Oh, go ahead.
I just have a couple of questions. Sure. So my first question is, do we have any historical knowledge of why we deviated from the MSBA policy?
You want to go? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was between times when I was in the district, but our CFO gave us a pretty detailed background on the a bond that did not pass. And so a commitment to the community at that point was that these 3 committees would be established for that transparency, so that there would be a long range. What is your plan? What are the finances doing, and what do the policies look like? So those have been in place. I've been back 11 years now, so probably about 13 or 14 years, because that was the community's feedback on partially why the bond, or a large part of why the bond did not pass. They felt like those 3 pieces needed to be in play.
And it sounds like the board still has that commitment to the transparency and to having the committees. It's just being locked into kind of these 3 is problematic. Is that correct?
That was the feeling whenever I've talked with Suzette. That was the feeling that we don't necessarily need 3 board members on each committee, for example. But the plan is to continue these committees moving forward, possibly adding another committee at some point in the future, so that maybe we want 2 board members on each committee and 3 public members. I mean, we could do any number of things if we are able to, as a board, change the composition of the board in our meeting that we're supposed to have at the very beginning of each term.
And then my other question was, and I think you kind of answered this, but so the MSBA doesn't provide for community members or administrators, right?
It is not that specific. It is not that specific. But if you've got something you want to add, I have no.
I'm not sure, but I think that while I agree and understand not being locked into these 3 exact ones, I do like the structure of there being community members. I mean, since I am one, and there being I like that this is a combination of community members, board members, and administration, because that seems to work towards collaboration. But I'm just interested in what other people think about that, and if it's not that important, I don't have emotion. I haven't given it that much thought to have emotion about it.
I think I agree, and I think that's part of the transparency was having community members as part of it, and then also administration, who's actually like boots on the ground and knows what's going on as part of those committees as well, which is why I think we went with that structure.
Well,
Well,
oh, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, is there some place in here that we could add, each committee shall consist of a combination of administration, community, and board members? It doesn't have to specify the number of those.
Oh, yeah, I was going to suggest just dropping the language about about board members, administration and public. But I think that would be a good. But I like so each, can you restate that again?
So into the MSBA one, I don't know exactly where to put it, but committees shall consist of a combination of members from administration, the Board of Education, and the community at large. What do you think? How's that?
I think we have to be careful. I like that. I like that. But then let's look at numbers. For example, if you want a committee to be truly equitable and functioning, we want to make sure that there's good representation on there. For example, this committee has 3 board members, 2 community members, and really 2 administrators.
Right.
So I think it may, because we don't want someone to misinterpret and say, okay, I want 3 board members, 1 community, and 1 administration.
Right.
So I think to provide guidance going forward, I like the structure that's given at the bottom where it says the board president shall only appoint, 2 or 3 board members to each board, because you definitely don't want 1 board member to be on a board, but also the superintendent appointing 2 administrators. And then where's the committee members? Board committees may appoint up to 2 community members annually. I like that section of it to be able to keep it more of an equitable manner.
I see what you're saying. You're saying from our Columbia policy,
Yes,
down here at the bottom where we've got a green highlight of 2 or.
yes.
Take that section from the board president shall annually down to the back page.
I would say go all the way to ex officio.
That's what I
If
was
we're gonna- if we're
just
going to-
thinking.
And just put a board committees and then have from where it starts with board president all the way down to the sentence that goes ex officio.
Yes.
And that will continue the flexibility that I think we're talking about. Yes, yeah, just that section.
Where should we move that within the MSBA policy?
Just tack it on the end.
Yeah.
So while we're looking at that, I have a question then. So on the current policy, it sounds like we're wanting to take out those 3 committees, the finance. But the rest of it looks very similar then to what is in the core manual. So what if
Yes.
we just took out of our current policy? There's under board committees, there shall be 3 board committees that list those out, the 1, 2, and 3, because we're picking it back up at that next paragraph, right? The board president shall annually appoint at the bottom there. If, instead of transporting all of that over into the core, why not just take out
Board committees.
our 3 committees that we have listed? Because the rest of it says pretty much the same thing.
It's very difficult to rewrite a policy at a table, and I hate to suggest this one more time, but I think that instead of just looking at the old and the new, somebody should create a document for the next meeting that combines and does the things that Carla just suggested.
All right.
Because I do notice there are a couple other places that have
Yeah,
little different things in them. And instead of trying to do it around a table
I-
at a meeting, I think it should be
I
done.
concur, and
We
I
should
think
all review it.
I concur, and I think that's actually in
So I
line.
make that motion.
Yeah, I second that because I concur. I think that's in line. What we've promised the general public is that we would start thinking about it and start working on it as of now. I think we're doing that, and we're currently not in violation of any policy, so I think we have some runway. So, so I'm going to second that. I'm going to say all in favor of moving this to the next meeting, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I will work with Dr. Yearwood to try to get a version of this that complies with what we were talking about with removing that section and making the language consistent between the two. Okay. All right, so BDDH.
Could we move to discuss BDDL first?
Yes, well, I will go ahead and move to BDDL because I think BDDH is going to take up the remainder of our time if we start working on that. So, yes. So BDDL.
BDDL, we discussed in October, and that discussion, if I recall correctly, was simply surrounding, there was changes that administration had, but we wanted to, or several of us recommended and wanted to add the additional contact of an email address since a lot of requests come in electronically. And the discussion at that time surrounded whether or not whether administration would set up a separate account like CPS Transportation has. Maybe it's called Sunshine at CPS K-12 or not, or if we were going to put a individual person contact, and Grant and Dr. Yearwood had some conversations around that, and we're going to think about the logistics and what the right course of action would be. And so, to my understanding, the only thing that was outstanding from that meeting was if we were going to add an email address in and what that email address was going to be, whether or not it was an individual or it was going to be a global email address to where if a particular individual is not available, another individual would be available. Someone would always be able to access that email.
Yes. So I had a conversation with our chief communications and did not recommend having a separate because, number one, everything has to be timestamped because everything has to be given within a certain length of time and so on. So that means that now they'll have to be checking multiple emails and all of that. So they had recommended that I'm trying to look at it here. Meredith, remember we spoke to Michelle, what her recommendation was on it? I believe it was that we, if a board member or member of a district committee subject to minutes transmits any message, no, not that one. Where is that at? I'm not seeing that. I'm missing it. It says,
In the policy?
yes.
I believe the recommendation from the custodian records was that microphone was not to add an email address, and that was to mirror what's actually included in the Attorney General's recommendation, which does not include email addresses. It includes written and phone numbers. Additionally, it didn't appear that at the moment the district has had complaints or concerns about.
No,
the
I
ability
agree.
to
There's
file.
not been
So
that I'm
I think-
aware of.
So I think that coupled with creating a new email address
Mm-hmm.
that was not necessarily tied to one specific person would be difficult to potentially
Right.
monitor, and then also to put her address in here would be difficult if we were to keep changing folks.
I agree.
So I think that was her comment, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Triggered my memory. Yes, absolutely. It was, we looked up sort of what the Attorney General's ruling, making sure that we follow the letter of the law. And that's why we put in the address, and that's what's required, an address, a phone number for contact. Yes. And she did not want a separate email. Yeah.
Okay. So do we have a motion on the floor? Or do we have a motion? You just turned it off.
I move that we accept policy BDDL as presented.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, all in favor of moving this to the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when we say as presented, okay, so we don't have an email address on
No,
the
there's
current,
not an
okay.
email.
Right.
I was thinking we'd put one in there, okay. I was like, no, we don't want that in there. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so with no further discussion, all in favor, please state aye. Any opposed? All right, that goes to the board. All right, now we will have a discussion for about a half an hour and see how far we get. Public information, or I'm sorry, the BDDH, which is the public participation at board meetings. We have a version that is clean in our packets. And so if you can indulge me, I'd like to start with that one because I actually have some edits now to what I actually presented, and I'd like to just informally discuss because I don't think we're going to get through this today. I think that we need to hammer out what we can, and then hopefully next time around, we will have one that is actually formatted. Do you not have? Yeah, it's
one
right.
do you
The
want?
one that's in front of you right there, the clean one. Yes, the clean one, that, because I think we need to do a little bit of that wordsmithing, or at least get an idea of what the committee wants, so that next time around, we can have something that is ready to actually pass on to the board, is my goal. Yes, to the one that doesn't have all the lines crossed out and all of that, so, the things that have been confusing about the policy right now, and because we just had the issue come up this last time around, are that it was not known exactly how do we put this on the agenda and whether board members may speak. So I think that I think we need to specify within the agenda item section whether board members can speak on it and whether and how it is going to be put on the agenda, because that was a little confusing this last time around. Just so you know, we had people use the current policy this time, and the way it was put on the agenda, because there is no specific process in the policy, their names were just put there instead of topics and what they were going to be stating. Oh, okay, so I'm talking about the agenda item section. We had two speakers at the last meeting that put something to, each of the speakers spoke to two different things, and it was a little at least I personally, I'll speak for myself, nobody else. I personally found it confusing just having their names on the agenda instead of having their topics. So I would like to say something to the effect of the board secretary shall place the topic and the resident's name on the agenda as a separately designated item, and just specifically enumerate that that is the case. And my suggestion is to put that after number 7. Does that, and since we're talking about this informally, does anyone have any issues? Does anyone have any problems with adding something like that? Under agenda items. I'm talking about agenda items right now, because specifically it relates to the confusion I at least had for this last meeting and agenda items. So I'd like to add that to the agenda items. Yeah, the board secretary shall place the topic and the resident with, or the resident's name on the agenda as a separately designated item.
And you want to place that after?
After 7. Go
I
ahead.
just have a procedural question. I'm not against that or
Okay.
at all. But my procedural question is, so you said to get out the unmessed with copy. Are we going to talk about each of these subheadings and like what do we want them to say generally and make sure that they say those things now? Or are we gonna kind of jump around to different issues? Like what's procedurally
I have two things that I want to add to this just after, because of my confusion the last time around. Then tell you what, let's just go down each section then at that point and do exactly what you're recommending. I'm going to take it as a recommendation, just so that we have a process to start to go by. I just wanted to make sure I got out these two things because it wasn't on this yet. And it's very fresh in my head because we just talked about it.
This clean copy that we have, was that from this?
The clean copy is what I sent to administration, and then administration has a copy where they put in the language so that you can see what was crossed out.
Right.
Yeah. So either way, if you're looking at it, it's still the same.
However, what's really interesting is this is really confusing, because this does not include several of these things, which is what was recommended to us at our October meeting.
Yeah.
But we're considering MSBA's recommendations too, right?
We're considering whatever we need to
Okay.
consider for this. That's why we need to go through the sections. I know it's confusing, but
Okay.
and I'm probably the cause of the confusion, but because I tried to make it in more of a digestible format instead of, and so we will okay, go ahead.
I guess I do have a recommendation. So my recommendation would be that for each of the subheadings, we just talk about what we want.
Okay,
And then somebody is tasked with checking the language before our next meeting and seeing whether it incorporates what everybody wants.
okay.
Because it's very hard to, again, like modify a document. So like if we're wordsmithing, it sounds like we're not to the wordsmithing stage yet. It sounds like we're still in the idea stage. Is that correct?
I think we're at the stage where
have we agreed on-
everything that we want in this should be going into it so that we can make a final product. So there are some options here that we'll need to discuss within this, and then if anybody wants to add something. So okay. So I'll just start at the beginning. Written comments. Written comments are essentially comments that come to the board in a variety of ways. Does anyone have any thoughts on the written comment section? Go ahead. No.
I have a thought on the introduction.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh.
I find the word acutely to be adversarial.
Okay.
So I would just say the board is aware. The board members are, when you say like we're acutely aware, it sounds like.
I think that was actually an MSBA.
It is. It is.
I find that word to be very like,
Yeah.
that's my.
I have, as an attorney, I have gone through briefs and just gotten rid of all adverbs, so I totally concur with that. Okay, so written comment. Is any issues with just the written comment? I think that's pretty straightforward myself. All right, so in-person public comment. We have some discussion, and in fact, Suzette, I talked to Suzette about what we have here as number 2 and the registration process. And let me get my notes from that conversation here. Suzette said that the idea that we could do something 10 minutes before the meeting is not realistic, that she had a talk with our board secretary, and that oftentimes we are scrambling right up until the last minute. She has to do things like finish out the closed meeting, get the recording set up, ensure Zoom calls are going and accurate, making sure that the public online is working, and numerous other things she has to do in the half an hour leading up to the meeting. It was a very strong recommendation from both Suzette and the board secretary that we do not add anything to her plate for the half an hour before the meeting. So I think that that is probably unrealistic, and that we may need to stick with what we have with regard to the online registration.
I think also other things to consider are, we have some restrictions regarding public comment that you can't speak about potentially student discipline or lawsuits or grievances. And one of the things that I believe our secretary does is look at the person who signed up and the topic, so that if it does inadvertently, maybe they might not know, she can make sure that they're aware that they can't speak on these topics, so they can decide whether or not they still can have something to say. And 10 minutes certainly doesn't give her time to do that research, I would agree. In addition, I think most people who are going to come with business before the board, whether it's a general comment or something speaking to the agenda item, have hopefully given some thought as to what they would like to actually say before 10 minutes before the meeting.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we are discussing this, and I've spoke with the board secretary myself, and just observing the procedure, it would be a hardship on her. So I like the idea of going back to the original.
Okay. Yeah, well, we're saying that in the final drafting, we will not use alternative 1. We will use a variation of alternative 2 in paragraph 2, because unless somebody has a different way that does not involve the board secretary having things to do within 3 hours of the meeting, because she does so many things leading up to the meeting. Let me see if I have any other notes on that myself.
I do have one. We do need to have some way of registering their address, because remember, for public comment, it specifically talks about them being a resident. And the only way we can capture that is if we have an address to double check that. We used to have it to where they say it, but then we did away with it. People, that's what I was told. So if there's a place to put it on the registration, that would be great.
I think the biggest issue that people had was them having to perhaps say it out loud.
Right.
I know when I spoke at public comment, we didn't have to say it out loud. We just wrote it on the piece of paper that was up there. So, I mean, I think as long as we're recording it through the online registration process, perhaps, or if they're calling in so that we can confirm they're a resident, but they don't need to disclose that publicly.
Right. I was just looking at the line that says, each registration shall include the speaker's name, the agenda item, and I was going to add and address, on, or the speaker's name and address and the agenda item.
Well, and let me ask you that. So public comment is only limited, are we saying that public comment has only been limited to residents?
Yes.
Or is it residents and parents historically?
It's
we have some students who have parents who don't live in the district because they're with a custodial parent in the district.
yes.
And typically, in a situation like that, they'd have an educational waiver on file, which gives the person who's on the waiver educational guardianship, so they would still be that Boone County resident.
Okay, so we would still accept that so whenever we're talking about resident, if it is in that case, we would still say, okay, they may live in Hallsville, but they have this waiver, and therefore they can still speak.
Yeah, if the student was attending school here, living with someone here, the person here in Boone County would have the educational guardianship. So
Right.
that's who should be speaking at the public meeting. Doesn't remove their legal rights, they do have educational guardianship at that point.
Well, but it could be a divorce with shared custody, and they could still, like, you could have one parent living in the district and one parent living out of the district. The parent living out of the district doesn't have to waive their educational guardianship for the student to attend Columbia Public Schools.
Right.
Right.
If the one legal parent, the other parent lived here, that would be correct, yes.
So would that parent who lived in Hallsville, we'll just say, that parent would not be a resident, but would have an interest, like in a shared custody situation.
Effectively, public comment is a discretionary component, so you all can create whatever rules you want as long as they are appropriate and reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So if you wanted to make a distinction there, you could. If you wanted to allow parents, regardless of where they live, to speak, it's completely up to you all.
You know, it was a case, for example, where if you have someone that lives in, I don't know, St. Louis that says, I want to come in and make public comment on something.
I understand that. I understand that, and I am not suggesting that we have what has happened in other districts where people from Kansas City come to St. Louis. I'm suggesting somebody who has a legitimate, a very legitimate, interest in our district because they are a non-custodial parent who still has, 50-50 rights in their child. I worry that if we are saying only residents, that we are cutting off some of our parents who should be participating in the district.
So maybe we probably just need to spell it out and say, where I don't see the part, residents and non-custodial parents.
Well, let
Or-
me
Or
add,
parents, period.
what about if we have a staff member for some reason that would like to come and make a public comment, but they live in Centralia? So I guess, would there be some sort of appropriate wording that it is a resident of Columbia Public Schools or somehow otherwise affiliated?
So what I'm hearing is resident, parent, or employee
Thank you. Yes.
is sort of what I'm hearing in
This
general.
is,
Yes.
I mean, this is like a brainstorming idea and how we,
Right.
how Grant decides to wordsmith it.
Yeah, I like that. Resident, parent, and or staff member. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, all right. And I think we're all in agreement on that. We'll make sure that the final draft has that.
No one's pet can come speak.
Right, nobody's pet and no out-of-state person who is paid doesn't need to come in and talk.
It said something like relationship to the district, is that easier than parent
have
guardian
people-
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have people that have a tangential connection.
They could be ruled out, I'm thinking, parent, guardian, employee, friend.
Yeah, okay, but we all agree it needs to, yeah, okay, all right. All right, and one of the other discussion points was in item 5. These have been thrown, oh, go ahead.
I had another question about that.
Sure.
So when we talked about the address, is that then public information, or that is not going to be public information? Because I think for two reasons, it's very important to try to shield addresses.
Yes.
The first reason is for survivors of domestic violence, and the second reason is that we have seen,
Well, and from a sunshine law perspective, if we ask for their address, then under the sunshine law, unless they're on something like the Safe at Home program with the Secretary of State, we would have to provide that address.
so I find that problematic for the two reasons that I just
Right.
mentioned.
No, I
So we can strike address.
But then how are you gonna check whether they're a community member? Yeah.
So then they have to be, what did we say? Oh, we said parent, staff, or resident. So how else can you check for residents?
Well, you can have them check which one they are. And so if we find out later they're not, we have some recourse. But it's just gonna be on the honor situation at that point.
Right. I'm good with that. Yeah. Parent, staff, or resident.
I think that's indicating to people that that's what they have to be, but I think that it's really important to not put people at risk by providing their address.
okay. I understand what you're saying, and I agree.
So we may want to, do we need to in parentheses, talk when we say a resident, what that means, to add meaning to it. So if we're not gonna ask for an address, we say you're a resident, how do you define a resident? Someone within the boundaries of the Columbia Public Schools. Perfect. We can put that in parentheses and we're done.
Let's
Yeah.
add a definition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get that, Grant? Got it?
Larger
Right.
than Columbia Public School District.
Right. So when we say within that, and like you're saying, we can easily check an address. I mean, it doesn't, we can always verify that our own way, to determine that this person is a resident. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. We can add that as a definitional section to this. All right. Anything else before? No, I'm not trying to, I'm just. All right. Well.
Let's make it past 2.
Okay, so number 5, the two things that have been thrown out are limiting it to the posted agenda and prioritizing things on the agenda. I think that the general public expects the second versus the first. Is there any discussion on that point?
There is for me, because having it on the posted agenda, having these speakers talk about the posted agenda gives weight to what we're doing. When they're coming in to talk about any comment from any different time, it does not always deal with what we're dealing with right then. The other piece is that I've watched that people will say it's to the posted agenda and then they maneuver. And so trying to stop some of that.
I think that's a leadership thing where I think, they're always trying to be cognizant of that. I don't know if you just said this, Paul, because my brain is jumbled. Did you say, because I had that one wording, discussion on action items will take priority, followed by discussion on other agenda items?
I have that in my notes, so I was actually going to, if we decide I was going to prioritize action items over general comments about the agenda.
I want to explain a little bit about that.
Go ahead.
I think all the agenda items are important, but I look at last night as a perfect example. I think we had 6 or 7 reports of something, like we had the nutrition report, a balanced scorecard. We had several reports that required no action, okay? So if 6 people decide they want to talk about some of those items, not even all the same one, and they sign up, and we have 7 people that want to address an action item that we are voting on, we're not going to be able to hear all of those. So I think it's important that we prioritize those people who want to speak to something that we're going to actually vote on, and then secondly, hear anyone who wants to talk about an item that's really just a presentation, because I think those are important observations as well. But I think if it's something that we're going to be voting on, we really need to make it a priority to hear what they have to say, if they have something to say on something we're voting on. That's why I'm doing that.
I agree with that because, the idea is to inform the board of, provide information to the board so that it can be informed. I like the idea of the action. I like the idea of items on the board agenda. I think that with the new law that allows for individuals to put things on the agenda, basically after having a conversation, I think we can look at removing that general public comment piece, as they have that available to them anyway.
So our current policy says members of the public addressing action items will be permitted the first opportunity to speak. If time remains in the designated comment period, individuals registered for comment on school-related matters will be provided time to speak. The total comment period will not exceed 30 minutes. So that's what we currently have.
April?
Saw it go off. What we currently have gives us the priority of action items, but then the rest of it, to me, jumbles it into general public comment and agenda items. So we get the action item people, and then you've got 5 people that want to sign up on the sidewalk's broken at my kid's school. I don't know, some general public comment thing. And then we've got 2 other people that want to talk on your wonderful report. We don't get to those people that are talking about an item on the agenda. So if we get rid of general public comment that's not on the agenda at all, then we don't have that issue. But if we keep that, then I feel like we need a prioritization in whatever way of action, agenda, general. So really, it was opposite, the way we've currently got it written, action is priority, but then the other two get jumbled together.
With the new law that allows agenda items, it doesn't take much. If someone really wants to address something that is not on the agenda, they can come in and have more time,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right, because I'm suggesting, I added, instead of 3 minutes, 5 minutes on the agenda item, I talked to Suzette about that, and we talked about the fact that maybe they need extended time. If they're gonna come in and take the time to talk to you, they should have a little bit more time, was the thinking.
And that's MSBA's recommendation, is the
And
5
that is also
minutes.
MSBA's recommendation. All right, so I think it's still a discussion point, whether we include general public comment, but I think we're all in agreement that at the very least it should be prioritized action item, non-action item. Is that? Other agenda item, sorry, yeah, okay. Is that a correct statement of the consensus? Okay. All right, is there anything else on general public comment?
So one more time, so we're going action, agenda items, and that's it.
And then with the possibility, and then we probably need to have a vote when we actually do the language on whether we include general public comment.
Perfect.
Because I don't want to do that by consensus. I want to have an actual vote on that particular item.
So just for clarification, we're saying then if you want to speak on an action item, you have 3 minutes.
No, you are prioritized. Action items will be put at the front.
Right, but that's a 3-minute.
Public comment will still be
All
3
public
minutes.
All public comment under this section will be 3 minutes, prioritized as action item, other agenda item, and then potentially general public comment.
So under this other agenda items, it's still 3
So-
minutes. It's not the 5 that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
public
Okay.
comment would be, any public comment would be 3 minutes. 5 minutes would be if someone requested an item on the agenda, like our 2 people last night. We would give them 5 minutes if they wanted instead of 3.
And we're still doing 30 minutes total for public comment?
That's how we drafted it, because that's seems to, we don't typically go over 30 minutes. And then, of course, the board can always allow for additional if they vote to do that.
And I will say we don't typically go over it now
That's
because
what
we
I'm
put
saying.
these parameters.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, even before
Been
we put
11
the
o'clock,
parameters
12
on,
o'clock, 1 o'clock.
it
before.
was not. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so anything else on general public comment? Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about number 6.
Sure.
All speakers state their name. Any organization
Oh,
will
this.
legally represent before speaking and their connection to Columbia Public Schools. So only lawyers can legally represent organizations, I believe, right? Like,
Well,
something about that language.
that's not true. For purposes of public comment, somebody who represents an organization can do public comment.
Represents an organization, but not legally represents that organization.
I see what you're saying.
So you're.
write that, Paul?
But
Yeah.
But also, the other issue I have with that is that I want to be really careful with public employees, because under the public employee speech doctrine, like if I get up and I want to say something and I don't want to say it as part of my job, I should absolutely be allowed to do that to protect my First Amendment rights.
Well, no, but if you're, what my thinking on that one was, we have people who do public comment for organizations, and if they are doing their public comment for an organization, they should state
I
that.
think the wording needs
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
I get that,
clarified
I
than
get
to
that.
say that. I don't have a problem if I am showing up as a representative of an organization, but the way it reads now is A, it has to be legally represented, and B, I don't think that there's any requirement or should be any requirement that I name my employer.
Oh, no,
when
that
I'm-
was not the intent. Yeah, I see that. Right. which was the intent there.
Removing the word legally?
I think I'm gonna reword the entire, that entire thing so that it's clear what we're talking about.
Especially, I think that's true with the connection to Columbia Public Schools, because staff members that speak to the school board are protected.
Right.
But if they're required to indicate their relationship to the school, so I just think I would
no, I
prefer
get-
us
I
to be
get it,
very
I get it,
cautious with
I get
that.
And you're right, they are definitively protected under the Whistleblower Act to talk to the board without repercussions. Yep. Yep.
Are we going to be able to get through 7 through 9 here in the next couple of minutes?
Sure, sure. What do you got?
Nothing.
Okay.
I'm just asking.
Anything else? I'll wordsmith 6 since I was the one who jumbled that one up. All right, so
No
agenda.
applause? We don't allow applause?
No.
No.
Okay.
Except time.
Well, apparently last night we did, but that's fine.
It was just for the high school.
I know it was. It's all good. So anything on agenda items?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see it on the clean copy,
Okay.
but on the MSBA,
All right.
Well, number one, you're gonna want a minute who can speak.
Right. Well, yes. Oh dear. Yeah. Because you're right. Because we don't want to foreclose those other people. I agree.
the one, I don't think it's on the clear copy, but board members may ask the resident questions, seek additional information from the superintendent or designee, or otherwise discuss the topic. You have something written.
I concur with April. It's in my notes to add. Board members may
From the
ask
document you
the
gave us.
residents
It's number
questions, seek
14 on
additional
that.
information from the superintendent or designee or otherwise discuss the topic. I think that I accidentally left that off of my on the draft I made.
On your
Yeah.
clean copy?
Yeah. Because that was also a question that we had last night, was can board members speak? And it is not clear if the agenda item section is merely a different form of public comment, or if it is an agenda item for which the members can do something about. And I think we need to make it clear that if the board members need some clarification or need something else from the superintendent, that we should be able to make that motion.
Well, I believe that the state passed this with the intent of giving residents an opportunity to put something on the agenda that may result in a discussion. And I see an agenda item, whether it's the nutrition report or your scorecard or a new business item that we place on the agenda, there might be opportunities for questions to seek clarification. And I don't see, regardless of whoever puts it on the agenda, shouldn't change what we may or may not want, because we may need clarification on something that they're saying, perhaps, potentially.
Or we may need to have a district presenter also to present more
Right.
information on the topic that we could ask
Right,
Dr. Yearwood.
exactly.
Can you have Ms. London come up and speak on this topic also?
Yeah.
Agreed. I think it's good.
I don't disagree. I think that in previous years, the way that's been handled is the board would say, I believe that's in Ms. London's area. Ms. London, would you reach out to that person afterwards? Because
Right.
potentially you don't
Yes,
want to
I've
say, Ms.
seen-
London, could you come talk on that? And I'm like, I don't know what
Well,
I need
that's-
to do some research or what have you.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Oh,
nobody
no,
should be put on the spot.
And ideally, it should be Dr. Yearwood. Can you ask Mrs.
Yes.
London to
Yes.
speak on that?
Well, and I remember seeing those, and that was, of course, before residents had the ability to.
Right.
I think maybe they could in the past. I don't think there was a good policy, really. But with this new state law and stuff, there's more of a procedure on how to get something on the agenda. But yeah, I've definitely seen that at previous meetings where can so-and-so get back with this resident on something.
And most likely we put it on the next meeting, so that we could have a speaker, district speaker on that, because you're right, we wouldn't put them on the spot for that
No.
meeting.
No.
Unless it was something that they were prepared to speak about. Yeah, absolutely, I agree. All right, is there any other discussion on agenda items in general and things we want to add? That's the 5 minutes is in there. Look at paragraph 8.
Yeah, because Paul, your draft that you gave us ends at number 9, right?
Yes, and now some of that's also within like paragraph 8.
Did you take, I mean, this is what they gave us in October, which goes to 17?
Yes.
Okay.
And because we're running out of time, I'll tell you what, anybody who wants to add something from that list, email me, and I will add it, unless there's some other discussion that we need to have today, because my hard stop is about 5 minutes.
What date is our next meeting, Meredith?
I believe it's the 22nd, isn't it?
Well, that's the fourth Monday, but I think you're right. I think we looked it up. The 15th is Martin Luther King Day.
Correct.
It's the 22nd. Paul and I remember now. It's the 22nd. So would it be appropriate to say to get you anything that additional thoughts that we have on this so that you could send them on to Dr. Yearwood by
New Year's
what
Day.
date? Thank you.
We
get it to him
no
by-
later than New Year's Day.
It's what you can do for New Year's Eve. It's what I'll be doing.
Yeah, just spend your time doing board policy on New Year's Eve. It's not like you have anything else to do.
You know that's probably what I'm going to do.
Yeah, some of us don't have lives, Karen. It's all good.
I have a life and I enjoy it.
All right, so if anyone has any other discussion, anything else, otherwise send me an email. I will put it together. I will send a new draft of this to Dr. Yearwood. Then we will get it into a form that we can actually vote on next time. And if there's a little bit of wordsmithing next time, then we can do that in minor ways. Hopefully I'll be able to take all this in and get it exactly right. All right.
Shall I move that we adjourn the meeting?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Paul?
Oh, yeah, it moves to the next meeting, yes. We didn't take a
Unfinished
vote.
business.
We didn't take a vote. It's unfinished business still.